Ms. Randall from Washington for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much. You know, I'm new to Congress. This is my first term, and I came from a legislative body that didn't have quite as heated debates in our committees, and we're generally fairly welcoming to our folks joining us to testify. So I want to say thank you to all of you for taking the time out of your schedule to come and share your experience with all of us and with the American people. I'm grateful for your time and for the work that you do in service of your communities and neighbors. You know, American families used to get all the same news, right? Folks would have access to a handful of news channels. They would watch the same nightly news programs. They would go from one to the other, and we could all agree on what was happening in our country. We all used to operate from the same baseline of information, but today it is no secret that we are operating in a much more diversified and fractured media environment. The content space, the use of AI-generated content, Americans now have to be able to discern for themselves whether something they are hearing is true or not. But investing in public media is a bedrock to our healthy, critically informed, and engaged public and our democracy. And I know that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle have argued over whether every piece of programming is in service of the public. But I also want to point out that, you know, in my fairly rural district, we have a lot of areas that aren't served by broadband. You know, a lot of folks who cannot easily access numerous podcasts while they are out working on their property. They, you know, have to maybe wait for something to download when they're at home, using maybe even a wired internet connection, right? Like I'm in a dead zone for about an hour and a half as I'm driving from one city to another in my community. But public radio is broadly accessible. And it's important for, you know, folks counting on the weather report, for kids who are, you know, in pre-kindergarten who are watching Elmo and learning to count and do math. It's important for the young people who, you know, were home during COVID and were able to continue learning with the help of public broadcasting. I think we have a lot of problems in this country, a lot of problems that we should be tackling for regular Americans who are struggling to afford to live, to afford housing, to afford healthcare, to be able to live the lives that they dream of for themselves and their children. I think we've got some national security concerns that have been talked about a lot in this committee, but I think talking about defunding public broadcasting and public media is an egregious misuse of our time here. Mr. Ullman, when we talk about cutting funds for the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, we're talking about those local small stations that rely on that money. 70% of Corporation for Public Broadcasting funding goes directly to public radio. I know you've worked in Tacoma in the past. I kind of attest to how rural some parts of Western Washington are. It's not all Tacoma. What role do public media stations like NPR and PBS play in supporting local stations? What kind of programming do they provide?
The local communities are at the heart of the work we do. As I shared in my opening remarks, we talk about the people and the places there. You bring up a memory of mine. Chehalis, Aberdeen, Hoquiam area, KBTC was the only public television station there. You know about the struggles that that community was having over a decade ago, job loss, all kinds of terrible economic situations. We provided educational services there with a $500,000 local grant that we partnered with the community on. It was incredible work. We do the same thing in Alaska with military families, homeschoolers, elementary schools. Those are the pieces we provide. And then local news stories that people can use about where they live and what they do. That's what we do. That would be lost.
Thank you so much. Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you. I now recognize the